Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the Coffee and Career series. What a fantastic opportunity to start 2021 with Dr. Alexander Ng as a guest speaker. And before we start, I'll walk you quickly through the flow. We'll have 50 minutes for a discussion, following by 30 minutes of Q&A. So you'll see a chat box down below the screen, so you can start typing your questions there. At the end of the session, we will email you the survey link. And we appreciate your feedback in advance as it helps us to improve our services to students. So let's start. As you explore careers in public health or thinking about a career transition, get inspired by Dr. Alexander's versatile career path. He first started his career as a medical doctor, where he was a chief resident at Middlemore Hospital in Auckland, New Zealand. And then he moved to the US to become a strategy consultant with McKinsey Company after completing his MPH degree at Harvard. After 9 years in McKinsey between the US and China, where he co-led the Greater China Healthcare practice, he joins the Gates Foundation as the Deputy Director of the China Country Office, responsible for the health and innovation portfolio. Today, Alexander serves as the Vice President of Tencent Healthcare and is leading Tencent's healthcare business. In addition to that, Alexander serves as an advisor to WHO's Digital Health Technical Advisory Group and as an honorary associate professor at HKU. You'll be lucky to take a course with him. So without further ado, I'll pass it to my colleague, Ms. Danny Jays, who will moderate the discussion.
Great, thanks, Rima. So hi, everyone, and hi, Alex. So thank you so much again for joining us today. You've had a really interesting career, and I know that there's a lot that our current or previous students can learn from your experience in terms of working in public health. And I have a whole series of questions for you. But before we go into that, perhaps you can just start by telling us about your current role at Tencent and what it is that you do at the moment.
Okay. Well, thanks. First of all, thanks for the invitation. And Danny, it's really weird to talk to you in such a formal way, given that you are my TA. So my current role in Tencent, so for those of you who might not know, so Tencent is basically a technology company that where I guess most people know us through WeChat or Weixin in mainland China. So within it, there is actually a growing and more importance in terms of health component on what we can actually use Weixin or WeChat relating to providing and connecting health services. But that's just on the surface of what you see. But there's also a lot of infrastructure building in terms of providing cloud-based solutions to hospitals, to pharmaceutical companies, to clinics, to government platforms, right? Similar to, I guess, within mainland, similar to the Hong Kong Hospital Authority. So I think this is where Tencent is pushing forth, right, in terms of not only the digitization, right, but actually moving a lot of the services onto the cloud. And I think this is actually more poignant and apparent of the importance of this, right, during the pandemic, when offline services are not available, right, and people and healthcare services providers are scrambling to provide online-based services. So this is I guess the core of the business right now.
That's really interesting, and like you say, especially given the current climate. And I have a couple of questions about technology later on, but to start with, it would be really great if we can just take a step back and talk a bit more about your early career and some of the decisions that you've made and some of the lessons, I guess, that you've learned along the way. So you studied for your MPH in health policy and management at Harvard, but before that you practiced medicine. So I guess, what motivated you to make that transition from working from clinical work to working in public health? And then can you tell us a bit about your career journey from there?
Okay, sure. I guess I had a few switching careers, not just jobs in a way. And I guess I actually I love the clinical interaction. I love being with patients. I like looking after them. I love engaging with the families on how to make their life a bit better. But I think they got to a point that the more clinical work you do, the more you realize that there's actually less and less things that you can actually help the patients with, because a lot of the issues that I observed at that time, treating a lot of chronic disease patients in cardiology, where you will see that actually lifestyle and risk factors actually have much more say, right, in how their health progress, not just illness. And also in terms of the way the system is structured, especially in New Zealand at that time, which is mainly a state-funded system, where you do see the similar issues that you see in the HA here in Hong Kong, where you do have waiting lists, where you do have a lot of elective procedures being postponed. You do get a lot of inequality depending on not just on race, but also on income strata. And so that got me thinking quite a lot. But I think that the early thought started actually when I was a medical student. So it wasn't all of a sudden it dawned on me after a few years of practice. So it was always something in the back of my mind. But then the push comes to shove of whether you want to do a bit of clinical, a bit of public health, or go full bang. Then at that time, I didn't make a choice. I just say, well, let me study public health first. Then I went to the US. So I guess that's the first inkling of pushing me from clinical towards public health. Now I should, if all things according to the original plan, I would have been back in Australia, New Zealand, finishing off my public health training, and then sit my exams and get my fellows in the public health college. But I didn't, because during the time when I was in Boston, I went to a lot of talks similar to these career talks. I went to these talks, but that one was actually hosted by a variety of companies, right? One of them was McKinsey. And so I got to first learn about this industry called management consultants, where they explained to me what we did. And the ones that were speaking to me at that time, they were also MDs in the US, and they joined the firm, and they were asking, we were chatting on what do you do? And in a way, I was discovering a whole new industry and a whole new stakeholder within healthcare that actually has tremendous influence, but I knew nothing about from my vantage point back in New Zealand as a clinical doctor. And so I was only in Boston for 3 months when I got the job offer, and I didn't know what to do. So thanks to your dear Dean Gabriel and our secretary Sophia right now, they were both with me in Boston at the same time. So we were flatmates in some way, and classmates. And they basically said, give it a try. So that's basically all it took, right? Was I talked to a few friends at the time and I gave it a try. And then after that, I was a management consultant in the US. And then after that, why I came back to Asia, it was serendipity. I had more and more projects around the world. One of the projects happened to be the healthcare reform project within mainland for the Ministry of Health at that time in around 2008. So that was the first time I came back to Asia, having left New Zealand or having left Hong Kong at a very young age. I knew nothing of the Chinese healthcare system. I know healthcare system, but I do not know the Chinese healthcare system, right? And so I was actually learning a lot the way. What I could bring was a lot of analytical skills, a lot of experience from around the world on what the choices that different healthcare systems could make and how they could be applied within China. So I think that brought me back, and it's just one thing led to another. I never planned to stay in McKinsey for as long as I did. I never planned to move back to Asia the way that I did. But it's sort of one thing led to another. Oh, does this feel right? Am I still pursuing my ultimate goal of trying to make a change, an impactful change within the public health setting? And if the answer is always yes, then I go ahead. I would say the same thing goes with the Gates Foundation, right? I was in my role at McKinsey, helping them to transform when a new CEO, Sue Desmond-Hellmann, came on board, being the first sort of medical doctor helming the foundation. we realized that there's a lot of change needed both in Seattle and Beijing office. We did a lot of planning, a lot of change for them, and then I think it was just before the Christmas holiday in 2014, they basically say, hey, do you want to put the money where your mouth is, right? Rather than advising, do you want to come and run it? Yeah, and then say, oh, does it sound good and exciting? And then the answer is yes. Then you move. And the same thing with the move to Tencent, right? It was a bunch of old McKinsey friends who are already at Tencent. They have actually been going about pursuing healthcare for quite a while, not known to a lot of people, but they were pursued by traditional techs, I guess the technical side of Tencent, right? Programmers, and they were coming about it from a layman's point of view on what they think as consumer that the healthcare that they will like. And after making a lot of mistakes, they realized that, hang on, I think they do need somebody who actually understands the healthcare system to actually come and help them bridge that knowledge gap between technology and delivery of healthcare. And I guess that's where I felt that, well, it was exciting at the time because we were also trying to pursue a digital strategy within the foundation on how to make that leapfrog for low-income country, especially in Africa and India. And rural China. So there was always, so I always say that if you connect all the different career moves point along the way, it was never a jump off the cliff of not knowing what I'm jumping into. I was already learning and doing something in that area, in that sector. So that it's not that foreign to me. So that I can actually make an informed judgment when I actually make the transition. So yeah, so there's always this connector between jobs or between career change or between location change. So that's, I mean, it's a long-winded story, right? But it's not great for the students listening because I never planned it. When I was a clinical doctor, I never thought of going to the US. I never knew what McKinsey was like. I didn't understand anything about the Chinese healthcare system. I knew who Bill Gates was, but I didn't realize that he had a foundation. And at that time, I definitely did not know Tencent, right? Otherwise, I would have invested in them a long time ago. But here I am. It's not planned. I would say it's luck more than anything.
Yeah. I think, well, as you say, it's not good for the students to hear, but I actually think it is good for them to hear because I think that happens with, like, I've been to similar talks like this before, and you hear from people, and actually a lot of things just aren't planned, and that's kind of practical advice that, you know, things pop up, and it's a combination of luck and partial.
Yeah. But I would say that. But one thing that you do have to have is you do need to have your own North Star about what you want to achieve in your life, in your career of 30, 40 years. And life is also including family, right? Because a lot of these choices I make with my family, right? With my family in mind, because they do get impacted by this as well. And so I would say that you do actually need to have that. I mean, I joke about it. I still joke about it with a particular person called Margaret Chan, that one of my ultimate goals at that time in New Zealand was that I want to be the Director General of WHO. But since another Hong Kong resident has been taking up that job, right? Politically speaking, I don't think it will rotate to another Hong Kong resident in a long time. So she destroyed my dream in some way. By doing what she did, right? But I jokes aside, I think that North Star is important because otherwise you'll get very distracted, not only on your choices that you make, but also while you're at a job, while you're working on something. And you will know, because right now to most students, it seems very tough to get your first job that you like, that you think has good pay, good lifestyle, good potential, that can tick all your boxes that you might have in your head right now. But I can guarantee you, the longer you work, the more experience you gather, the more options you're going to have. And a lot of the times people are going to come at you. Headhunters will be calling you for, hey, I've got this opportunity. Would you like to go? Like, if you don't have your North Star and understand what you really want, you'll get very lured and distracted. I have a lot of offers to join investment banking for a long time to be a healthcare equity research analyst. Yes, it's going to make me a lot of money, but it's not going to help me in achieving what I want in terms of making an impactful change in the healthcare system. While they would have their own story to brainwash yourself, oh, no, this is very important. Without money raising, then they can't, and you can't develop new drugs. Without new drugs, you can't actually cure new patients, right? There is always a way for you to convince yourself why you make the move is good, but you start losing yourself. After a few years. So that's my only advice, that you do actually need to understand what you really enjoy, what you want to do. Now, also making a lot of money can actually be a good goal, right? Because if you're true to that, then you're true to your decision. But I would just say that, like, I would just say, just find what matters to you the most, right? And I think that's the most important thing.
I think that's great. So you've talked a little bit about working in different sectors, and you kind of alluded to various sort of transferable skills. But I wanted to ask a question about sort of skills and competencies. So what skills and competencies in particular do you think have enabled you to work so successfully across these different areas?
I think the ability to learn very, very quickly. Now, I think if you tease that out, I think there's a few components to it. I think one, I think you naturally have to be curious about a lot of things. But and with that, I mean, you have to accept the fact that you actually don't know a lot. Or even if you think you do know a lot, you'll be prepared to be proven wrong and challenged. So I think that's actually a very, very important aspect of it. If you look at what you can say that helped me along the way, because I never pretended to know everything that I know. There's always going to be somebody who will know about a particular topic a lot more than I do. It doesn't mean that I have to compete and beat that person. I just need to actually figure out what I needed to know from that person, right, in order to actually help me with what I'm doing. Right? For example, I'm never going to be able to beat your Dean Gabriel, right, on epidemiology. But hey, if I have an issue I couldn't figure out, I couldn't understand, I call him up, right, and I learn from him, right, and the same thing goes for health policy and financing, right. I call up Bill Shao at Harvard, right, one of my mentors, right. So I think I say it's the ability to just keep on learning. Now, I coded when I was young, but I can never code the way that my team does right now. So be curious, be learn. I think you don't need to be overly, you know how people say fake it until you make it? There's some truth, but sometimes I don't like that phrasing, because that means that you don't tell yourself, or you don't open yourself to learning, because you think, oh, I can just fake it along the way. I think what that means is you should have the confidence, but you should not pretend that you do know everything, because I especially in this day and age where things change so quickly. If you go back to the library right now, right, you go down to the lower ground floor, go to the library, pick up any book, like except for the most basic science, right, and most of the applied work, most of them are outdated. Right? Same for clinical trials, right? Same for any of these studies. So you have to keep on learning.
So this might be similar to the last question in a way, but what have been some of the most important lessons that you've learned during your sort of early to mid career?
Early to mid career, how to deal with failures. I think that's very important. I think most people, especially if you made it to Hong Kong, you made it to this faculty of medicine, right? You are creme de la creme in your studies and your work, and you've had a lot of support, right? But I think failure comes in different ways. As long as those failures are not catastrophic or life-threatening or career-destroying, I think it's okay. It is okay not to be the top of your class, top of your school, top of your team, top in the company, top in your batch. I think it's good. It's okay to compare, because when you compare, you understand what you're good at, what you're not good at. what others good at, what others are not good at. So I think it's actually good to compare, but not just on the surface of comparison, but understand how come other people did this exactly the same thing better than I did, right? Again, it's all part of learning, right? But I think it's if you actually be able to fail early and have people pointing out to you why you fail, I think it's important. So when you earlier on, when you didn't do so well, or when you get a bad evaluation, do ask why. Do ask why, not in a challenging way of, I disagree with that. I'm actually so much better than what you think. What you think I am. But more so, well, where could I do better? What could I try? But I think the onus is actually up to you, because what I've realized right now, most people in the workplace are very, very bad at giving feedback, performance feedback. I think most people try to shy away from it because they don't want to be confrontational, or they're just lazy sometimes. But you should just keep on insisting and ask why I can be better. But you should not ask it in a way to corner your supervisor, basically say, oh, if I did this right, then would I get a better grade next time, right? But do it in a way that helps you, right? What could I do that differently that could actually make a situation better? Some things are black and white, but most things aren't. So I think you have to ask, but make sure you ask it in a constructive way. Otherwise, it will also backfire.
Okay, so I wanted to go back and pick up on the theme of working sort of in different sectors, because I think that's something that's quite central to a career in public health. So I wanted to talk a bit about your time at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Mm-hmm. So I think while you were there, you worked to build different health partnerships with lots of different stakeholders, so governments, private sector, NGOs and local partners. So could you tell us a bit, what was it like trying to engage these different sectors and build partnerships, and what are some of the biggest challenges that you faced?
Well, I think it's a lot of fun in doing that. Because at the foundation, the issues that we were trying to solve were either very intractable issues or issues that not a lot of people will put that as their primary focus. Like prime example, now it seems silly, but at that time, one of my main, I guess, strategy and project was pandemic preparedness, on how to support and develop a good vaccine manufacturing system for pandemics, on how to ensure that we do have a good technology platform like the mRNA platform that we funded, so that we can, once we have a new pathogen, we have a surveillance network to pick up that pathogen. We have a network to sequence it. We have one way to put it into vaccine. We have a quick way to actually get it approved. And we also have a large-scale manufacturing process, right, to actually make it. Like, so it seems silly right now, but that you can imagine how hard that is 5 years ago or 6 years ago when we started doing it, right? That culminated to the founding of CEPI, right, who ended up funding most of the innovative vaccines that is being produced right now. The foundation was actually improving the vaccine manufacturing quality standards of the major plants in China for the last 15 years, right? So that they can get WHO pre-qualified. So they understand what the WHO pre-qualification standard means, so that when a vaccine comes out from the mainland, especially the ones that are coming out of these few manufacturing plants that we work with, I actually know exactly what quality standard they actually hold and what quality standard others who that we do not work with hold. So that I think at that time, the most challenging part is convincing people that something that we really worry about will happen. And it's catastrophic, and that's why we need to do. And most of the people actually, the biggest challenge is that theoretically and logically they understand it, but emotionally you cannot get them engaged, because it's just not that important for them at the moment. Because a lot of the things that we were investing in, we were working on, were something that could be, I guess, it could all go down to dumps. Because if no pandemic ever happened, you will never realize the value of it. but so thanks to COVID-19, right? That would have made my job a lot easier, right? I mean, I still talk to the friends and foundation in Seattle and Beijing, right? They basically say that if I haven't left Tencent, my job will be so much easier over the last 12 months, right? Because it would just be accelerating a lot of the work that we were doing for a very, very long time and couldn't get a lot of traction. But I think even without this pandemic, right, we did make tractions. Because I think what you needed to do was find out not only what interests you and what you want to get out of the partnership, but how you can make your partner become successful. Right? And I think for them, investing a lot of the time, space, and our money into improving vaccine quality might not be an important thing on their list. But if we draw enough of a big carrot, right? Sometimes, well, you'll be the first one to get WHO pre-qualification within China. They got a lot of PR out of it, right? And I would say that the general manager of the manufacturing plant in Chengdu that was managing the manufacturing of the Japanese encephalitis vaccine, now he is the CEO of the entire CNBG, right? China National Biological Group, right? Basically the biggest Chinese group that makes vaccines right now that's being rolled out, right? So because we joke about it, right? But because of that, he got a lot of international exposure. He understood what quality system means, and he makes sure that was rolled out, and he got recognized for it, for doing the right thing. Basically, he got recognized for doing the right thing, and his career went up and up and up. And I think that is actually what's important, right? You find a hope to convince them that what is in it for them. And I think it's all down to partnership. The partnership is not what you want out of it, right? How can you convince the other person that they will also be successful as they work with you?
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about digitalization earlier when I asked you about your current role, and you've got a lot of experience in global health and that sort of area. So I wanted to ask you about the role of digital technology in public health and how this has changed over the course of your career. So that is the first part of the question. And then secondly, how do you see it shaping the future of public health?
So I guess my first touch point of digitization or electronic health was back when I was a medical student, when I was a clinical doctor, when New Zealand started implementing an electronic healthcare record system, where as a student, as a clinician, you will start be typing up discharge summaries and looking at lab results and radiology reports and packs on the computer. Now, I still remember in my postgraduate diploma thesis, I actually wrote it on wireless technology in healthcare. Because at that time it was very wire-based, but they were starting to be mobile, where you can add a little old PCMCIA card. I think nobody here would know what it is except for me, right? That will allow you to actually be mobile with a laptop in those days with a modem. And I was starting to imagine what the future could be along the way. And I would say that I'm always wrong, but then I think that imagining, that dreaming about what could come next, right, was actually very, very interesting exercise, because you could actually see part of it being realized in real life and part of it is not. And sometimes it's actually not the technology issue. It's actually a commercial issue or a system issue where something just doesn't make sense. It might be sound, but it just doesn't make sense from a business standpoint or from a funding standpoint. But now I think people think that the phone can do everything. But what you realize that the more you have, I think digitization can definitely help with efficiency, can help with transparency, can help with compliance. But I think we rely more and more of that because of the efficiency gain, and we are always limited in physical healthcare professions. So we are using this now as a solution to address the supply and demand mismatch problem that we are seeing. Now, but I think that is just a band-aid on a very, very large gaping wound. It can help, but it cannot solve, because fundamentally, a lot of healthcare is not just about the science, right? It's also about the compassion, the human interaction. And I think this is where I don't think anything digital can take away. Right? I think most of people will know right now, right? When people are during lockdown or even in social distancing isolation, right? People do get depressed. By nature, humans are social animals. We do need interaction. We do need physical touch, right? No matter how many times I speak to my kids on iPad, right? It cannot replace a hug in real life. So I think that's the same for healthcare. I think digital can only be a supplemental solutions to healthcare. I mean, people are, I think, too dependent on looking at or dreaming about, well, maybe digital, we can have an AI chatbot that can be as good as a human, maybe in the future, but I don't see it happening in the next 5 to 10 years, right? So don't put out a false promise of a solution, right? When you don't go back to the root cause, right? Well, part of healthcare is about the care. And how can you also make that happen? Well, you can make your life a lot easier in complementing it with the digital solutions out there, right? But don't think that it will replace and solve everything that you're facing at the moment. So I mean, that's hard. I mean, I shouldn't be saying it, right? Running a large digital healthcare business, right? I should be saying, yes, we will solve all your solutions, right? But I just don't think that's pragmatic. Yeah. And I think if you actually believe in that, and government and others are not stop investing, but stop the increase in spending in healthcare. Because they think, oh, okay, now we have a scenario. We don't need to train that many doctors. We can train less now because we can make doctors more efficient, right? I think that's the last thing that we want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. So the work that you're doing at the minute with Tencent, you talked a little bit about some different initiatives that you're working on, and also around the current situation in terms of tackling COVID. So could you just tell us a bit more about that, about the different initiatives that you're working on around COVID at the moment?
At the moment, I think there's not a lot of initiative around COVID in mainland China. There's not a lot of that. But I think the jokes aside, right? I think in the first phase at the beginning or 12 months ago, we were basically trying to get the information out there to the public on the best that we can, the accurate sort of the case numbers that's being reported to everybody. Because I think at that time the population is in fear, and because they don't know what they come up against, so naturally they're scared of everything. So having an accurate information out there is important, right? And also to actually tackle the infodemics, the fake news that will be circulating in and around COVID. I think that's number one. And then and after that, I was working with Gabriel and Joe Wu on a lot of the data analytics, right, on how to project what the future could look like with COVID, right? So that was actually the start of it, right? That led up to the sort of the first projection on what the spread outside of China could look like. If we take into account of travel pattern, the pickup of positive rates outside of China. And at that time, nobody know what the reproductive number is, and it was actually a very interesting exercise. But I think if we fast track that, we did a lot of platform for providing online healthcare, but now is mainly around the vaccine rollout. How can you actually ensure that the 1.4 billion population can all get in different phases 2 doses of vaccines? I think that is a huge undertaking, and we are not leading it for sure. The government is leading it, but we do play a supporting role in getting the right information, getting the right connectivity, telling people where the point of vaccinations are, what information do they need when they actually go get vaccinated. So there's a lot of work that we need to do to connect people to the services that they need. So I think that's what we're busy with, to ensure that there's a way for them to not only get vaccinated, but also to monitor the AEFIs. And not just AEFI, this one will be AESI, right? It'll be a first reaction of special interest, because I think that these vaccines are so new, and it's going to be rolling out in such a broad scale, unprecedented scale, that every single vaccine will have unintended side like incidents or adverse events that should be monitored and measured and be analyzed before making too quick of a judgment. Because I think you also don't want to throw the baby with the bathwater. With the only solutions that we have right now. So these are the things that we're still quite busy with around COVID, and I think this creates a very different spin on public health, because the old public health is really about control studies, knowing exactly what we're doing, then launching it, right? This time around, everyone is literally building the plane while we're flying it. And it is, yes, first do no harm, but right now it's really the trade-off of we actually don't do it quick enough. There's a lot of preventable harm that we are not preventing.
It's a fascinating time to be in public health. You've had such a varied career, so interesting, and a lot of the students that are on this call today are just starting out in their careers in either public health or global health. And as you kind of alluded to, many of the things that attract people to pursue a career in public health is the desire to make some sort of impact. But I think one of the biggest challenges that we hear from our students is that this career path can also be quite convoluted. So it's not like a clinical degree where there's clear progression. So that's one of the reasons why we're trying to host more of these events to hear from people who are working in public health and what their career path look like. So to wrap up, I've got a couple of questions that we're asking all of guests that work in this sort of area. So the first question is, how would you define a public health and global health job?
Oh, a job. I guess it goes back to, public health, global health, international health, now planetary health. I think these are just names being applied for academics to get a cool name on their professorships. At the end, it's about population health, right? It's about whether something that you do is going to have an impact on a scale that's greater than n equals 1. Right? It can actually, it doesn't have to be big. You don't always need to do something that impacts the entire world. The people why saying planetary health, right? That includes climate change, right? It improves, yes, that's important. But the further away you move away from an individual person, the more detached you are emotionally. And that sometimes makes the work very lonely and difficult. And also make what you do very non-specific and not meaningful. So sometimes I always say that as you're starting out, find something that then you can attach a meaning to, even though even though public health can be, how do I actually improve the healthcare status of Kuntong, like a suburb, right? Working with the community health center, like not looking after one individual, but looking after, let's say, all the elderly living in assisted living facilities in that district, right? Which may be in terms of hundreds, maybe even 1,000 people, right? But if you can make a meaningful change to it, I would say that is actually what public health did, because you are making some change that will positively impact more than one person at a time. So you don't always have to say, I need to be the minister, I need to be this in order to have the impact. No, you don't. You can apply your skills in different way and different scale. Yes, not right now, my job is directly impacting, I guess, you could say that, right? The potential use and livelihood of 1.3 billion population within mainland. But at the same time, not everybody uses WeChat. There's a lot of elderly people who actually doesn't have a smartphone. There's a lot of poor people who didn't have a smartphone. There's a lot of kids who are not allowed to have a smartphone or not allowed to have a WeChat account, right? So while the story can be big, right? But when you boil down to it, right? I'm also leaving a lot of, you would say, marginalized population, kids and elderly. Then what do you do with them, right? And then I think you just have to keep pushing yourself, right? On try to start small, but you can grow your impact through scale and through partnerships. But I think if you very earlier on, if I pluck you out of your Bachelor of Global Health and Development and put you saying, hey, hang on, now you're working on planetary health, I think you could actually lose your way very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But that's how I define a global health job, right? More than any.
Yeah. So if you were interviewing someone for your team, what qualities in particular would stand out for you?
One, they have to be very logical and structured. And then I think two, from whether the CV or from what I can glean from talking to them, they need to have integrity. And I think three, you need to be interesting. Now, interesting not in a way of, I guess, the typical tiger mums in Hong Kong, right? Making sure that you have a portfolio when you are 2 years old and you are grade 8 in your piano lessons, right? But are you an interesting person to talk to? Or the test I would do, would I enjoy sitting on a airport lounge or in the boarding gate when the flight is delayed for 5 hours?
Yeah.
Right? Would I enjoy sort of talking to you and being next to you for a long time? Right? I think that's important. That to me is a test of many things, right? So that's what I look for.
I think that's such great practical advice. So our last question, similar. So what piece of advice do you have for our current students who are looking to work in this field?
Students in the field of public health and global health?
Yeah.
I would say that make the most use of your internship time. Now it's difficult because you can't travel too much. To me, working on internships is not helping you land the job. I think working on internship provides you the only opportunity to date around and find out what you like.
Yeah.
Go to different geographies, go to different types of organizations, right? Don't keep repeating. A lot of people think that, well, the internship in my penultimate year is where I can convert it into a full-time offer. No.
Yeah.
No. Those are the only times, like if analogy, right? If getting a job, first job is like getting married, right? You want to date a few times first to find out what worked and what didn't work for you, right? Yes, you can turn out to be magically good when you didn't do anything and you land your first job and you do that job for 40 years. But we all know that the probability of you having striking on that is very, very low. So if I'm talking to how many students right now, 58 right, participants right now, right? Maybe one of you will get very, very lucky. So congratulations, right? But for most of you, you should look around, and you guys are still young. You need to figure out what you like, what you don't like. When I say find a North Star, I have no idea what I was doing when I was 16, when I started medical school. I was 16. I was still halfway through my puberty. So you need to go out and try different things at different places, right? Before you figure out what you like, what you don't like. It is actually very, very good if you hated your internship and you suck at it.
Yeah.
Then you actually don't know what you don't like. Then you actually be able to find out, well, what makes you tick. Everybody is different. Just because I had this career doesn't mean that this will actually work for any of you.
I think that's really great I know for our GHD students anyway, I think that's really great for them to hear, because they have an internship as part of this program, and that's just the beginning. It's so early on in their careers that that's the time that you should be finding out what you like and don't like and all of that. Okay, great. Well, thank you. It's been really great talking with you. I've actually really enjoyed hearing about your career and all the anecdotes and insights for things that you've learned along the way. I've personally found it helpful, so I'm sure that students will as well. So I think we've got about half an hour for a Q&A session. So I think Rima's gonna will help moderate the Q&A session. So I think students, if you have questions, I think you can put them in the chat box. But yeah, I'll hand over to Rima to moderate that.
Thank you, Jen.
Rima.
Thank you so much, Danny, and thank you, Alex. It's so insightful, especially as practicum coordinator. The emphasis on internship and that practical experience is so important. So going back to Q&A, as we have about 30 minutes on, or even longer since we finished earlier. The first question is from James Tan, MPH student or alumna. He's asking, do you think you will switch your career again? And if yes, to which field?
I don't know. Maybe, most likely. I guess the ones that I haven't tried, where KG did try to entice me that, well, if there's actually a right opportunity working, not just an advisor, but actually at a WHO for real, right? That will be an interesting experience. I don't know. I'm doubting that. Whether that will actually be interesting, but I think I will. Knowing well, with past behavior is a predictor for future behavior, right? That I will. But I think the one field that I haven't really spent time on is actually working for government or public sector, like an international organization. So if anything, that would be yes. Another potential will be to actually have my own startup. Like that could be another field. But yeah, very likely.
That's interesting. I think there will be another question about the business later on. But second question is, you talked about the importance of knowledge and skill set. What is something that you wish you knew 10 years ago? Or what would you ask yourself, your younger self, to start learning, doing in hindsight? Hindsight, sorry.
I would say learn a new language. I find that incredibly important. When I first went back to Beijing for my project for the healthcare reform, right? Like, you got to understand that I'm a Hong Kong kid that actually grew up most of my life overseas. I can read some, I cannot write that much in Chinese, and definitely cannot speak Mandarin, right? And I would basically say that, like, I have very, very thick skin in that first few years. But I think it's just something that, well, if I actually have a much, I guess, a better language competency, right? I probably would be much more effective at what I did compared to when I was first there in 2008. Right? I would be able to interact more, understand more. My suggestion, my advice might actually be more grounded. So I would say that's one. I think the other one is, one thing I knew, keep the hobby. Keep one hobby. Don't do a lot, because you won't have a lot of time. Keep one hobby that you definitely would enjoy a lot for a long time, and just keep doing it. I think the persistence is important, right? I think this is actually one of my regrets, right? That there are a couple of hobbies that I wish I have made time for, but other things got into the way. But if I look back, I could have made a much bigger effort at doing that. And the other one is continue. And this one that I try to do, and I can always do more, right? Is actually continue to actually stay in touch with your friends. And I think that's another one. You don't know what life is going to throw at you, right? But usually I found that it's still really my childhood friend will always come to my rescue for anything. But I think sometimes you do need to invest and work at it and be more proactive to stay in touch.
Definitely. Friendship is also like a job. You need to work on your side. Talking about digital health, many people are pushing new techs such as healthcare cloud, health AI, robotics. What do you think is or are the real next big thing that makes real sense?
So you think that healthcare cloud, AI, robotics doesn't make sense? I think those are people are trying to make it real, right? Healthcare cloud, don't worry about it. It's just moving from literally, right, moving from a server, you had this right in front of you, to storing it somewhere like in an iCloud, right? It is not real big technology. Like AI is still being progressed right now, but one thing you know to know, AI is biased. AI can learn what it's actually trained from. If within what you do, you already have a lot of biases, right? Whether it's actually biased on race or on income or anything, right? It will. AI is a good it is a good mirror image of what your system is. So don't depend on AI being the be all and end all, right? It's sometimes it's actually very frightening to see some of the outputs of AI, because then you basically take a look in the mirror, right? Oh, this is actually what my health system looks like. These are what doctors look like, because the AI need to actually train on data. The data comes from existing practices. I guess the next big thing that makes potentially real sense is not just on healthcare, right? But it's actually the ability to actually use AI to do things that is actually very, very difficult, like protein folding, like target finding, more on the basic science research, I would say. And I think that's going to make the next leap forward for us. It's still, and I think that it's just about the pursuit of fundamental science. I think that will continue its way. And people that talk about quantum computing, I'm still skeptical how soon that will be realized.
That's very interesting. And again, thinking about the future, if I have got the question from Ho Kwan Mo, if I have got a great healthcare business model idea, just like you talked about, what advice would you give to maximize the success or minimize the failure of it?
Well, if it's great, it should succeed, right? You don't know. You just need to go and try and do it. If you really believe in it, spend a few years, work on it. If you're a bit more conservative, work at it as a side gig. But once you think it's ready, you do actually need to spend your time and put the big successes never come without accepting a lot of risk, right? Risk doesn't mean failure, right? Failure is the outcome. So I would say that in order for you to maximize the success, you need to actually take a lot of risk. But you can't do it if you sit on the sideline and think about it, right? Just go and do it.
Great advice. Just do it. From Anonymous Attendee, could you please share any ideas or suggestions for transferring the career path from, I'm sorry, that disappeared. Dear Dr. And what is the core competency for joining the digital health industry? And could you elaborate the role of Tencent Health in the COVID-19 pandemic?
I talked a little bit about the role already, yes. Right? So I think the competency in digital health, I think there are many different types of people that needs to come together to actually form any digital health company, right? There needs to be someone from the health side, somebody from the technical side, and somebody from the business side. So I think these three, if you are, I think most of you guys are mainly in the realm of health. So you don't need to be expert, but you do actually need to understand the business side of things. And you do also need to understand the technical side of things. I think what's going for most of those audience right now, especially you are starting as an undergraduate student, you've been lucky to be living in an age where coding would be part of most of your training and school. So working on a computer, learning how to code might not be as foreign to you as it would be for most of my peers in my generation. So I think if you really want to be successful, right, you have your core, which is health. But I think you do also need to understand the different sides of the business and the technology in order to be effective. Now, the reason why you need that is, again, go back to why I say I wish I learned a new language, right? It's really about communication. Because sometimes you might have the greatest idea, it makes sense to you, but it will make absolutely no sense, or you have no idea, and the other side will have no idea what you're talking about because you guys are using different languages. And here I'm not talking about English, Chinese language, right? But you guys come from a very different thinking frameworks. We think about incidence and prevalence, right? And we think about numbers needed to treat, while they think about profit and loss statements. While the technology side, right, they think about code efficiency and bugs, right? So you need to be able to actually figure out a way to communicate across these stakeholders that will naturally reside within any company, especially in digital health.
Thank you. Next question. What is your view on teleconsultation, as MCHK seems to have concerns on compliance? Companies also start using AI for operations. What do you see in this digitalization? And
that's medical counsel, right? I assume. Now, I would say that if you believe that teleconsultation is just another way for you to have a face-to-face consultation, then the liability will actually reside with the healthcare provider. Now, you would say that you will not be able to do examinations and all of that. True. You might not be able to prescribe. True. But there are still a lot of things that you can actually do online. Now, if you actually, as a medical profession, if you actually do think that this patient's warrant a more serious investigation, will require a physical examination, then you should call that patient into your practice, right? I almost see that like it's almost like a triage nurse in a hospital, right? They triage you based on your severity, and even if an emergency doctor sees you, right, if they think that you run more investigation, they will admit you to the hospital to do more investigation, right? So to me, teleconsultation is just one step. It's the step in between, let's say, a triage nurse and a physical primary care doctor, right? And I don't think it can solve everything. If it's positioned in that way, I think we could figure out a regulatory framework that works. Like, just because you talk to a doctor online, right, and he missed a cancer diagnosis, doesn't mean that the doctor is at fault. But then the doctor has the responsibility to say, hey, just talking to you online is not going to work, right? You need to see a physical doctor.
Mm-hmm. True. You cannot replace this physical kind of connection at the end. What do you think is the future of digital healthcare? How can we, public health graduates, contribute?
I think the future of digital healthcare is healthcare. I think we're making a big thing about digital this, digital that, right? Like I think it's going to be part of the healthcare system. So I don't think you need to do anything in particular to chase after it. It will come to you.
Mm-hmm. All right. So the student Vicky Long is asking, if you were to do a health tech startup today, what area would you choose to focus on and why? Interesting.
I need a much longer time to think about it. Because you also need to have a startup where the idea is not taken, or you can actually do it much better than what the others are doing. I mean, it's a tough question. We're investing in a lot of startups, and a lot of the time it's just based on blind faith possibility, right? Sometimes we just know that it might not succeed, but it's okay. It's part of the failure process. It's hard. Even the ones that are going IPO right now, most of them Tencent we have invested in them. And even some of them, even though going on IPO, I actually still don't believe in the sustainability of the business. I don't know. Sorry, so I couldn't give you a good answer on this. It needs more time.
All right, that's all right. Juliana is asking, in your current role with Tencent, what do you think is the greatest barrier of the uptake of digitalization in healthcare? What digital technology is currently underrated and that you think has the ability to really transform care delivery?
I think the uptake of digital healthcare, well, I think the barrier, one of them we always talk about, right, is actually the regulatory framework about what it is and what it isn't. And I think there's a lot of security concerns. There's a lot of fraudulent concerns that you actually need to address. Sometimes just chatting, right? How do you know that you're actually chatting to a real doctor, right? How do you prove the real identity? There's a lot of deepfake technology that you can actually have right now, right? That you can fool a lot of people. That's one. I think that's one barrier, and I think but then to be honest, the greatest barrier is interoperability and information exchange. That this issue is happening offline. Just because you go to a GP, everything that the GP knows about you is not at the hospital when you actually need to see the doctor. You see information and information asymmetry between doctors and patients, right? But you also see a lot of information gap between providers. Now, I'm seeing this appearing in the digital realm as well. People are building walls around different ecosystems so that they do not communicate well with each other as a way to protect their business. So I think that's actually not just greater barrier to uptake, right, but the greatest barrier of having an impact in digitalization of healthcare.
Interesting. Thank you. Esther Wong is asking, what is your advice towards somebody in their mid-careers towards changing of careers? So, mid-career change.
I don't think there's anything called mid-career, right? I'm a bad person. I would just, if it makes sense, just do it.
Makes sense.
I still don't know where people say mid-career, right? So that you have to assume that, well, you only work for 50 years and you have worked 25, or you work 40 years, you have worked 20. So that makes you mid. I don't think it. I think that's being thrown out the door right now. With well, come on, Rosie's still working when she's 80, right? So then does it mean that like your mid-career is after 30 years of working because you work for 60 years? So I would just say, if you don't like what you're doing and you feel bored and you feel dejected, you don't have energy, find something else.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Edward Pinkney is asking, thank you, Alex, for an interesting discussion. For those just starting out, using your analogy of dating around, how does one do that whilst also maintaining forward trajectory, i.e. whilst developing and staying faithful to a global health mission? Edward, incoming president of HKU Public Health Alumni Society.
Well, I think what you described was actually important, maintaining a forward trajectory. You can always take a little bit of a side angle, so your forward momentum remains, right? You don't have to, you have a North Star, but you can actually deviate a little bit left and right as you're figuring out different things, right? So I think it's actually, it goes back to how you define as your forward trajectory of what you really care about. Some people ground themselves to is around HIV. So I want to actually work on HIV. I may do things on epidemiology. I may do things on vaccine development and drug development. But along the way, it is along the same theme. So you can keep building on the same theme. I think that's the most important part.
Thank you. Anonymous question. What's the strategic positioning of Tencent Healthcare versus Ali Health, Ping and Good Doctor, and JD Health, B2B, B2C?
This sounds like a question from an equity research analyst.
Anonymous.
Ali Health and JD Health is about selling drugs. Right? Don't let them fool you. Go to their P&L, go to their business. They are all about e-commerce drug platform. And the drug is actually not prescription drugs. It's OTC, and it's actually not majority OTC. It's about selling condoms and healthcare products. It's about vitamins, right? That's majority of the business. Ping An Good Doctor is providing an online teleconsultation. They hire their own teams of doctors. But most of them, if you look at Ping An Good Doctor, they only serve the rich. They only serve the upper middle class who are purchaser of their life insurance and health insurance products, right? That's majority of the customers, right? And I think that those are different, right? And Tencent Healthcare, we try to actually provide to all. Right now, we don't sell drugs. We connect. We provide digitization tool to actually help you find healthcare easier with online and offline. So even in offline, you can use the Tencent sort of electronic reimbursement card, right? So you don't, if you forgot to bring your card, you just bring your phone. So I mean, our strategic positioning is actually very, 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 very different, right? For those of us in this business. We are both B2B and B2C.
All right. Thank you. Kapu Long is asking, thanks, Alec. Quick question. As mental illnesses is predicted to be the biggest disease burden by 2030 by the WHO, do you think technology is actually going to help or exacerbate the problem?
Hang on, isn't it already the biggest burden, depending on how you measure it? It's been the biggest burden for a long time because of underreporting. I think I think it does. Part of it can help, and because of your ability to be able to connect, and they're actually more interesting, right? That there are actually games that are being approved almost as a drug, right, to use for ADHD kids. There will be more gamification, right, to actually help with dementia or Alzheimer's disease or for recognitions, right? But I think for things like schizophrenia, I don't think digital health is going to help. But then if you, I think there's only a part of technology that can help, but fundamentally is that I think where technology can actually make the biggest help is in mental illness is to help us understand what is mental illness. Most of the mental illnesses we have right now, we haven't figured out the biological and the etiology of it. Some we have, a lot we haven't. So I would hope that technology will actually help us solve some of these unanswered scientific questions, right? So that we can have a better grapple on how to solve it, right? Alzheimer's is going to be a huge burden. We still don't know what exactly causes Alzheimer's. We have a lot of guess on what amyloid does, what the tau protein does, but we're not sure. We haven't developed a good drug against it to actually prove that it is actually the pathway. So I think technology, to me, is not about the solution. It's actually by understanding the causes of mental illness.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Another question. You mentioned a lot of low-income individuals do not have access to smartphone and as a result cannot access the healthcare online platform. With the world, particularly in China, going into cashless and mobile application-based, do you think healthcare will be seen more of a privilege than a right?
Well, I think it should always be a right, but it's a biased right, right? I don't think it's a privileged. I think, except for a few countries around the world, right? I think most do actually put universal healthcare coverage, right, as the core goal of health system strengthening. But within there's always going to be inequality because of moving to digitization, right? Even though if elderly has a smartphone, the fonts are not big enough, right? What about folks with color blindness when they cannot actually look through? So there's a lot of accessibility issues that we have to deal with. But I have to say it, right? For any for-profit business, right? It's never their number one concern day to day. You almost need to make a conscious effort, right, into reminding the team that you actually need to do it. And if there are a lot of priorities that they need to work on, it will never be the top. So you just need to keep reminding the team that what about the kids? What about the elderly, right? What about the poor? Now you can say, oh, well, in time they'll get their cell phone tower. In time they'll get their economic improvement. Then they can get the cell phone, right? But you just don't try to fool yourself that you are covering everything, because there's something digitization can't help. I can't help somebody move out of poverty, right? That I love to do it, but I don't think I can. So just be more grounded in what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Edward is asking, thank you very much for the great talk, Dr. Ng. Oh, there is a Tencent supported IPO coming up lately. Why do cloud? What are the prospects of these cloud services in healthcare? If I'm an investor, should I invest into them?
I'm not going to comment on cloud. It's too big of a question. We invested in a lot of different things. A lot will come from IPO right now. Let me tell you this. Most company who goes IPO, they're not IPOing to help you make money. They're IPOing to help the investors and the founders make their money. Think about that. They pick the timing to suit them and not to suit you. That's all I would say.
Thank you for that. I think similarly, Tai Hing Lam, what is the potential and future development of chatbot and related technology?
Is that the Tai Hing Lam? No. Well, I think, it is already here. It is already here, whether we like it or not. You go to any banks, they have a live chat as a chatbot at the end. I think chatbot is just another representation of a good search engine. It will help you find an already known information a lot quicker, which I think is actually very, very useful to actually improve the efficiency of work, right? Even but then I think the onus is on different organizations, right, to make a chatbot that works for them. WHO is also, they worked a long time on a COVID chatbot, right, that they try to open source, but they realized that it was just too difficult because they need local knowledge that applies to the local context to actually make it work. You can't have a generic chatbot, right, for anything.
True.
It's always very contextual.
Well, Sin Ting is asking, as an MPH graduate who is interested in getting into healthcare consultancy in North America, what kind of skills or qualities do you think can help me secure my first job in the field?
So you're in Hong Kong. I think if you are, I think the biggest issue right now is for you to get your work visa and be able to work in North America. I think your biggest the quality you need to understand the system. The Canadian and the US healthcare system is so different from here or anything in Asia that you actually do need to know what they. Healthcare is not a global business. Healthcare is an incredibly local business, right? Even across states in the United States, it's actually different, right? So you pretty much have to live it and breathe it, right? In order for it to be effective. So this is an area, if you really want to do it, I think you just need to move there, right? I would say that your ability to apply and land a job that will sponsor your visa for you to go is impossible. If you're asking it, you might already have a US citizenship, right? Then you just need to be there. I think that it's incredibly hard right now if you try to actually do this. I mean, I moved back without knowing anything around Asia because it's actually within a company, and they basically said that it's okay. Like Alex looks Chinese enough, right? He knows more Chinese than average American, but he definitely knows health systems and public health, right? That's why I was put onto that project. I didn't put on that project because I am the most proficient in Chinese. I was put in that project because I was the most proficient in healthcare system reform within McKinsey at that time. And there are local Chinese teammates, right, who help me bridge the local system, right? So you need to find some of your strength that they would want. But if you ask me right now, it's going to be very hard to say that you know something that nobody in the US do know that will actually make you stand out, right, amongst all the other local applicants within the healthcare consultancy space. So I'm sorry, I don't know who you are and what you're good at, but you need to find that spark that will interest your future employer to actually hire you instead of a local.
Yeah, that is actually very true. I have a question about anonymous question from your experience in McKinsey. What can you share more about the nature of your work as a management consultant? And what did you enjoy most about your work there? And what skill sets are required to thrive in a consultancy firm?
I think the skill set is, I think, one, being a good communicator, to be very analytical, because everything that you say needs to be backed up by a very rigorous analysis. So your scientific training within Hong Kong U will definitely help you with that. And if you're a medical doctor, I think if you do enough communication training, that will also help you with that. And the work that we do is we try to solve problems from a very, very at a high level, not in the bad sense, right? But we always take the perspective if we're working for a company, right? Take the perspective of the investor and the CEO, right? And not somebody lower down in the rungs of the organizational ladder, because we try to actually move the entire company in the work that we do, or make change that happens in a broader scale. But to do that, you need to be able to weigh a lot of risk and benefit trade-offs in all the decisions you make. Because at the end, strategy is about making choices. And none of these choices are no regrets, right? Some are, but most of the, if they're so good, I think the business owner will already know what they are. So when they ask you to come in, right, it's really about how to actually tease out the risk-benefit trade-off, right, of actions that you make. And most strategic decisions you make should have a point of no return, right, where you can't just step back after 2 years of failure, because I think the cost will be too great. So I think that's what you do. You got to be a little bit courageous, right, and saying something that might not be music to your client's ears. Like, you're never going to be the yes man, but what you're there is provide the facts, provide the analytics, and help the client make their own judgment based on your advice.
Thank you so much for that. So we have, I think we'll take 2 more questions. How did you know that switching from medicine to public health was the right choice for you?
For me, right choice. Well, I think my family sometimes think that's the wrong choice, right? When they need to see a doctor and I can give them meds. And no, I think the right choice for me is, I mean, if you ask me, would I go back to, can I imagine a scenario I go back to practice clinical medicine? I can. I can actually think that, because it's not that I don't enjoy it. I thoroughly enjoy clinical medicine, but I just think that I get more enjoyment out of solving more difficult problem in public health. I actually think public health is a lot more difficult than medicine, in a truest sense, because you don't have a solution most of the time. You need to figure it out. Whereas medicine, 80% of what you see, you do actually have a standard pathway, standard treatment. It's really about finding what they are, right? But most of the public health, your road is more unpaved. So I think my personality, I actually like that more than I like uncertainty more than certainty. So that's how I knew that that's actually the right choice.
That's very well put together answer. It is known that the public healthcare system is overloaded in Hong Kong. The waiting time is long and the consultation time for each patient is short. May I know your view on what can a public health practitioner do to change this condition with the help of digitization, while Hong Kong is facing population aging and elderly has difficulties in using technologies?
I'm sorry to pour cold on you, right? Even with digitization, the wait time will still be long. It will still be overloaded, and consultation time will still be short. I think digitization can, like you said, right? If you think about the Hong Kong health system, is it really overloaded? It's only overloaded in the public system. The private system is very, very cushy right now. They are not overloaded. Consultation time is not short. But what you do is you need to pay for it. So I think what you're saying is really within the Hong Kong HA, right? But if Hong Kong HA continues to be the safety net for the poor, I think they will always be under the constraint. But however, with Hong Kong HA is already pretty good at digitization, right? If they already have a unified healthcare CMS, there's a lot of systems don't have, right? So be grateful for it. But however, at the same time, I do think they can actually digitization can help with a lot of the, I would say, menial tasks like chronic disease management. That could actually be for those who can actually use the digital technology, shift them towards it, but don't force it onto elderly people or the ones who can't actually use it. Because then it goes back to the right versus privilege, right? Then you're starting having a digital bias. So you always need to look after the ones who cannot shift and start shifting the ones who can towards the digital platform. That will buy you time, but that will not help you solve the problem.
Is that okay? We'll just take one more. What are the type of job opportunities available at Tencent Healthcare? Are positions more business functions, sales, marketing, corporate development, or technical functions?
Both. they continue hiring all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all of them and more. Like I said, right? You do need technical, business plus health. It'll be great if you can tick 2 of the boxes. It'll be perfect if you can tick 3 of the boxes, right? So, but it's hard, right? Especially for fresh graduates. So I recently hired a doctor from PKU who was interning at Shenzhen Hospital and did a master's in Karolinska, who can code, right? To me, that kid was probably the best fit that I could find from a on paper point of view. But he just joined, he worked 6 months, he's doing great right now, but I don't know how he'll pan out, right? So if something looks good on paper doesn't mean that it will work in a company, right? Because it's more complicated than that once you are actually in a company setting. But yeah, but no other company will be successful if they only have one type of staff.
If you're okay, Alex, just one last question and then we'll wrap up. Many public health problems such as tobacco, alcohol, obesity are still unresolved and are getting worse in many countries, including China. Are you optimistic about this in the next few decades?
Yes and no. Tobacco is a difficult situation in China because it's a huge income source for the government. And plus, there's a reason why people are addicted to it. It feels good when you smoke. Same for alcohol. Same for obesity. It feels good when you eat dessert. It feels good when you eat a cheeseburger. Right? It feels good when you eat deep fried food. So I think we are going against the trend of human desire. So I think it will. I think it is a problem we just have to manage. We cannot resolve. To be honest, I hate to say it, right, but COVID is a good natural selection balancing power. If many people may have equal chance of getting COVID, but if you smoke, if you're obese, if you're chronic disease, I'm so sorry, right? Your mortality rate is a lot higher. Maybe this is actually the balancing risk factor for the ones who can control themselves in their desire to not smoke, not drink, and have a healthier habit will survive. So Darwin. I mean, it's dark. It's a dark end to this discussion, but
yes, I was just gonna say, let's end on the optimistic note. But it was really, really insightful, and what a fantastic opportunity for students, for colleagues, for alumni to join this talk and have this hour and a half with you. It's very generous of your time. Thank you so much for being the guest today with us.
Okay, no, happy to have this chat. Thanks for organizing this.
Thank you, and Happy New Year, and all the best in your career and private life.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. We'll end here then. And students will send you the email with the survey link. Thank you.